It's a landscape that's iconic of the great American West. Hi everybody, welcome to this week's episode of The County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. You know, we're out here on the Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument right now, and in a few months' time, the cattlemen will be back out here to graze their cattle on their allotments for the summer. They've been doing it this way for generations, but that may all change soon because of a lawsuit brought by the Western Watersheds Alliance, which challenges the BLM and specifically the monument on how they manage grazing. Well, that process is now underway. It's part of a larger process, and we're currently in a portion of it called scoping. That's where they take comments to see how much they need to include in their management planning. Those comments end on Monday, but you still have time to make a substantive comment. Now, we are going to cover those issues today in our show with our panel a little bit later. But in order for you to understand how planning works, we thought we'd take you from A to Z in the planning process.
The Bureau of Land Management oversees 42% of the lands in Utah. Whenever those policies are in need of updating or other changes, the Bureau follows a simple process of identifying issues, developing the planning criteria, and then issuing a notice for public comment. This is known as the scoping process and has a basic goal of collecting enough information to create several alternative plans for management of a particular area.
So we're starting to put together an idea of how we might want to amend our monument management plan. It's a management plan that's been in place since 2000, but it did not address livestock grazing in any general fashion, and we need to address livestock grazing on the monument. The way that we do that is we amend our plan.
The BLM is putting together an amendment for grazing on the Grand Staircase-Escalante Monument, a planning area encompassing approximately 2.2 million acres of federal lands in Garfield County and Kane County, Utah, and Coconino County in Arizona.
We started this comment period back on November 4th, and we will be taking public comments through January 13th. We will be looking for information about how livestock grazing affects the monument and how livestock grazing can sustain the monument through the planning process.
A concern among rural communities is that the planning process is targeting livestock grazers who depend upon the monument to keep their operations afloat.
That's probably the first comment that we get from a lot of people. And that's not what this process is about. This process is about understanding how we can manage livestock grazing in a way that sustains healthy lands and sustains the kind of uses that we're seeing on the monument these days. It's an unusual place, and so where livestock grazing could impair those resources or harm them, we're charged with protecting those. So that's one thing that we'll be looking at now.
There is still time if you want your voice to be heard on this issue. If you miss the deadline, there will still be additional opportunities to comment and participate throughout the process as the BLM formulates alternatives and releases a draft environmental impact statement before the final report and record of decision to be released in 2016.
We've got a series of workshops that we're hosting down south. So on January 15th, 16th, and 17th, we'll be doing a series of socioeconomic workshops to try and understand how livestock operators are organized in the ways that they use the monument, and also the impact of livestock grazing on the economy of the area.
But for now, the BLM is seeking substantive comments to help identify what issues they need to take into account for the report.
We're looking for people to give us some pretty specific feedback on the ways that we manage livestock grazing on the monument. So we're asking some pretty pointed questions. We're trying to raise some ideas in people's heads. Things like, what kinds of vegetation treatments, what kinds of ways should we be manipulating vegetation on the monument? Should we be doing it at all? What kinds of range improvements should we be looking at? Should we have more? Should we have less? Where should they be? Where are there conflicts, if there are, between people, say, that are hiking and people that are running cattle on the monument?
If you have comments to add to the BLM's process on this issue, they can be made online at blmutgseis at blm.gov. For the county seat, I'm Bob Weldy.
Well, now you have a basic understanding of the process involved in land planning on public lands. When we come back, we will delve into some of the comments from those who will be most affected by a change in grazing, the cattlemen and the counties here in southern Utah. We'll be back in a minute on the county seat.
I didn't order this.
Compliments of the lady in gold.
Hello, trouble.
Anything worth doing in this quiet little town?
You look like the kind of man that could show a girl a good time.
You strike me as the kind of girl that likes a manicure and a massage.
How's that for a manicure?
I hate golf.
I was hoping for something a little more vigorous.
Vigorous, I can do.
And I thought you'd be riding side saddle.
What? I'm gonna regret this. How about that manicure?
The best part about raising children here in Vernal and the Uinta Basin is just the smaller community that makes you feel like when you go somewhere, you know everybody.
So we packed up our 3 kids and here we came to Uinta County. And what a great place it was. What a great move. Great schools, great outdoor activities. Just a really great place to raise your family.
My father, he was an engineer for Chevron, retired 39 some odd years. And Jeff, my husband, it's the same way. He's always worked in the oil and gas, always had a job here. And with that industry, when it does good, the whole valley thrives.
Uinta Basin's been fantastic in supporting what we've tried to do both as a business and also in the development of mountain bike trails and the sport of mountain biking.
I'm able to run up to a beautiful place like this and spend some good quality time. It's one of the big reasons why I live where I live.
And that makes it just a wonderful place to have little ones like this.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are discussing today the change in grazing on the Grand Staircase, the scoping process that's about to wrap up, and the impacts that it will have. Joining us for our panel discussion, Jim Matson, County Commissioner from Kane County, Harold Hamlin, a rancher out on the Grand Staircase. We also have Kevin Heaton, who's with the USU Extension Service. You're a faculty member, is that correct? Yeah. Thank you all for being with us today. People will be sitting at home in the Wasatch Front and say, big deal. What impact does this actually have, grazing, on the economies of this area?
We did a study a few years ago on the Arizona Strip, which borders the Grand Staircase. We found that approximately one AUM generates about almost $90 in economic activity, and you take 75,000 permits across the monument. That's about $6.5 to $7 million, which is maybe up on the Wasatch Front with all the economic development going on up there. May not sound like a lot, but to individual families in Kane and Garfield County, that's a pretty huge economic number.
How many people that you know are engaged in some form or other in ranching?
When we look at what's happening since the recession started in 2008 and our economy in general, you know, this particular industry and this particular culture has really helped family stability and the stability of our whole community and county as a whole. And I don't think there's any of those that have gone out of business. They've just been there, they've been hanging on, they've been contributing to our education system. As Kevin mentioned, it's a pretty important factor.
And I think when you take grazing out of this area, or you take the tourism out of this area, I know you're on camera, but every time a tourist finds me on my horse, I'm on camera, and he wants to talk about what we have here and what we enjoy here. And I don't think we can jeopardize that.
Is tourism compatible with what you guys do in ranching?
Absolutely compatible. And I think you got to talk about the history and heritage a little bit here with the tourism, because we are called Kanab's Little Hollywood. When Hollywood found us, they were on the Grand Staircase filming. And the tourists that come out there, the people who come to watch and see this way of life. I think I'm a fourth generation rancher. My grandfather fought in World War I and my father in World War II, and they fought for these freedoms. They fought for the freedom to run their cattle where they've been running them, for the process that we have. And it's been a good process. And I think when the Wasatch Front and the United States discovered the Grand Staircase, those men and we have done a pretty good job of preserving everything that they wanted to about that.
Do you think you would actually step backwards if people in tourism were to come here and discover that there was no longer cattle ranching? You think they'd feel like they were cheated out of an experience?
When we look at our tourists, particularly from Europe, they're wanting to see, you know, what our heritage is and what the cowboys were and all of that. And so when they're right here and readily apparent, that's part of the experience, you know. So it's just not a sterile landscape. It's something that functions, and it takes this element to really make it work.
Additionally, there's a lot of tourists that come here to ride horses at Bryce Canyon and Science Canyon. Well, ranching provides a fundamental basic industry to support the tourism industry in that regards, because who are you going to get to take these tourists on rides if you don't have a young cowboy coming up that learned to ride somewhere else? And so also the horses that they get for these operations come from local ranches, and it provide an important source for the tourism.
Well, I think we have demonstrated at this point that it's an important part of the economy for grazing to continue in the area. So when we come back, we'll take a look at what the plan is possibly going to do, is what the mitigating factors are, and what things should be considered as they go through the scoping process to come up with a new plan. We'll be back with the county seat in just a minute.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
Get ready, set, jump! The day starts off at sunrise with the Cisco Disco. Come catch Cisco fish at Cisco Beach on the east side of Bear Lake. After the fishing, why not jump in the lake yourself? The Bear Lake Monster Polar Plunge starts at 11 a.m. at the Bear Lake State Park Arena. All proceeds from the event go to Primary Children's Medical Center. Gather your family and head north for a great cause. Visit bearlake.org for more information. Rich County, take the plunge.
Almost 45% of the oil produced in Utah, 7.8 million barrels, comes from Duchesne County. That oil feeds our state economy, provides job growth, and supports local business. Here in Duchesne County, we're working to make Utah an economic, cultural, and technological leader. Whether you're here for business or pleasure, Duchesne County will welcome you with open arms and invite you to explore all the beauty of the Uinta Mountains. Duchesne County, close enough for business, far enough to get away.
Rediscover your sense of adventure by attending the 16th Annual Bluff International Balloon Festival, January 17th through the 19th in Bluff, Utah. Visit us for some of the most beautiful, unencumbered red rock flying in the Southwest. Utah's San Juan County, where life is elevated.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about the change that's afoot in the Grand Staircase on grazing allotments and grazing allocations. They've been in a scoping process. They're now going to move forward from here into coming up with a plan. You know, if you were just to tune in, you'd think on the surface, well, we've been operating in the Grand Staircase without any kind of a plan.
There's always been a plan on the Grand Staircase, even before it was a Grand Staircase, back when it was the Homestead Act. And the Congress decided that in 1934 they were going to have the Taylor Grazing Act. And many people in this area were homesteading, and they said, you can have these allotments of the ground that you're running on as an allotment, and you'll be the manager of the surface rights to it, and the government will maintain the mineral rights. And that was before the BLM was ever involved. And then the BLM came into effect, and they had managers that worked with the ranchers, and they maintained it, and they made it productive. I think you would have found the Grand Staircase every bit as attractive before it was made a designation or a monument than you do today.
The monument has, physically on a landscape basis, hasn't changed a bit. It's just been its designation and some of the regulations and rules that have been put into place that have changed its overall character and effect, and it may be something that we may not really want to enjoy over time in that current fashion. I think we've hurt ourselves.
You're operating right now as a cattle rancher.
Yes, sir.
You have a process, and you come up with a plan for your individual allotment. Is that how the current structure is?
With the BLM, with the agency that's over that, yes, we have a plan. There's certain months that we can turn out, and there's certain numbers ahead that we can turn out. We have an allotment for 100 head, and some years we can turn out 60 head. That's determined pretty much by the range comp and the rancher, depending on the vegetation. And believe me, that rancher doesn't want to destroy that so that he can't use it next year. He's not going to turn out more than that range will handle.
So what the lawsuit's about is taking, not working individually, but coming up with a big, broad picture as far as managing. Is that what prompted the move?
I think, Chad, the lawsuit is about making allocations that they're going to try to, convince a judge of, which probably are outside the range of exactly what's involved here. So it's an attempt to have a legal end run on a process that otherwise has been working quite well.
Yeah, well, I think the ranchers are doing a great job out there. The range has improved over time. We can document that with photographic evidence. Also, our range trends are improving. Now, that's not to say there aren't some areas of concern, and there's not some areas that we need to look at to maybe improve the management. But a lot of it has to do with the monument manager preventing us to improve or to use science to manage livestock grazing. For instance, they may limit us on water developments or range restoration projects, or maybe a pasture rotation improvement project. So there's some issues there that need to be addressed as well.
I think any place that you take grazing off of that you're finding out, or taking timber off of. We have the Kaibab just south of us here, where they've taken the sawmill and timber out. You have wildfires that are destroying more habitat, more wildlife, more watershed development than grazing ever did or ever will.
There'd be people who would argue that, well, a monument is supposed to be a preservation zone to preserve its natural and archaeological beauty, and so they would say, take man out of it and just let it go its course.
I wouldn't say let them take it out of it, but if you'll find every archaeological development out there, you might find a cowboy that has been involved in that. I have a grandfather who, we have cliff dwellings, and clear back at the turn of the century, he built fences around those cliff dwellings to keep the cattle away, so that they're still there today. Removing the grazing and the cattle is not going to hurt that part of the monument, and there needs to be management. I'm not saying that there doesn't need to be management, but it needs to be a solution management that involves our local leaders and our ranchers, not just a dictator management.
Leading up to what will become a management plan and some of the comments that have come in, is the information that's coming in accurate as far as the group that filed the lawsuit? Do you know?
Well, I think it's interpreted a lot to their own opinions and perspectives, and I think there's some hidden agendas there that they have to remove livestock grazing off from the monument. And so I think it's biased in that regard.
When you look at Western Watershed's complaint, they end it by saying that they want to have their court costs and other expenses covered. They're in it for the money, and they're creating the issue for fundraising and membership drives. So this is one of those attempts under the Equal Access to Justice to further their organization's nonprofit motives. And so they have to have a bloody shirt to hang around somebody, and this is what it is.
Another instance, like for instance, Western Watersheds, they tend to point fingers at sacrifice areas like around water holes and developments like that.
Okay, but now you and I were talking during the break that there might have been a problem there, and I think we'll carry that over to the break. We'll pick that up when we come back, and I want to find out about your experience on the monument, how hard it is to maintain a riparian area. Stay with us. We'll be right back with the county seat. We're talking about grazing and the Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument and how things might be changing and what a prescription might be for that. We'll be right back.
Skiing is expensive, right? Well, how about we do something about that? Eagle Point, Southern Utah's premier resort located right outside of Beaver, Utah, is proud to announce $25 lift tickets all season long. Ski and snowboard Utah's newest resort for the lowest price, and find out why the Point, with its family-friendly staff and great atmosphere, will become your second home. $25 lift passes all season. Go to eaglepointresort.com for eligibility and restrictions. 5 lifts, 40 named runs, 1,500 vertical feet. Endless possibilities. Eagle Point Resort.
The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, SITLA, manages 3.5 million acres of Utah lands with the express purpose of providing financial support to further the education of Utah's students, while promoting local industry, oil and gas, even residential development, all at the same time. Through the careful use of trust lands, the School Land Trust Program will distribute nearly $37 million to Utah schools this year. The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, building the state's permanent school fund.
How would you spend an extra day in Utah Valley? Stay one more day. Visit utahvalley.com to make reservations. Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
You go through the day-to-day repeating what you did yesterday. Don't you wish you could access that piece of your life that's missing? Find the beauty, serenity, family fun, or anything else that's missing from your life in the Cedar City, Bryan Head area. Gain access to your adventure, whether it's camping, hiking, the arts, festivals, or just a getaway. Visit ScenicSouthernUtah.com for details on all the adventures that you can access in scenic Southern Utah.
Welcome back to the county seat. We've been talking today about grazing on the Grand Staircase Monument. The monument sits adjacent to the Kanab field office, and Harold, you run cattle on both allocations. So let's talk about a case study. We're talking about the fact that you can't even maintain riparian areas and some of the difficulties, and maybe compare on the monument versus off the monument. Could we do that for a minute?
Sure. On the monument, we can't go in and develop a spring or extend a water line. We have to have EAs done on everything on that, and we do on the field office too. But on the monument, if they say this riparian area is being destroyed because the cattle are in there drinking on it, and typically that riparian area is being shrunken or limited, then they want to pull the cattle off. When in fact and truth is that the floods that come down through there are covering that up, and then it grows back. And we want to take and put a head box on it and extend our water lines out away from there so that the cattle don't go down into that. We couldn't do that on the monument. But on the field office, where I have permits over there, we've been able to develop those springs, fence the riparian area in, take the water line and pipe it out across, and distribute it where there is no damage to the riparian area. Most of the riparian areas in the Grand Staircase, I feel personally, are impacted more by Mother Nature than they ever are by a cow. And I think that's the difference. The difference is rules that this administrator chooses to enforce, and this one chooses to say we can work under that.
Anything you'd have to add to that, Kevin?
Yeah, definitely those off-site water developments that Hal mentioned are very important to scientifically manage livestock grazing. If we have what we call sacrifice areas, where if the cattle come in and congregate, just the mere nature that they're there and their hoof action is going to do some damage. So if we can move those sacrifice areas to an area that maybe it's a hardened surface like a slick rock plateau or something like that, that would be better, so there'd be less damage. The cattle still have water. It may move it to an area that they can have more forage as well. So anyway, yeah, that's just one thing I was thinking.
Another one, Chad, is if they would let us restore these seedings that we have and get rid of the brush and get that back into production like it was, the cattle don't congregate down where the water and greener grass is.
Now, didn't you tell me that when you're over on the Kanab field office side, you can do aerial application?
Yes.
But in the monument, you have to just walk around and...
Yes, on the monument you can't do aerial application of like spike to control brush and invasive plants. They've restricted us so bad in there that you really can't go in and do anything mechanically. You can do it from a horseback or foot, but in the field office right across the road, you can take a D9 cat in there to rip your water line in, or to grind trees and to get rid of the pinyon and juniper. And it's just management. It's not
really a change in terrain.
It's not a change in terrain.
You know, counterintuitively, anything that's done to restrict grazing will also affect wildlife. You know, the two exist out there, they coexist. And so by doing this dumb stuff, they're really hurting the others as well. So it doesn't make any sense.
Well, the other thing that may not make any sense is that we are just at the end of the comment period, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, January 13th is the cutoff for people to be involved in the scoping process. So if you've got anything to say that's constructive, I would suggest you do it now. And we have come to the end of our program, and I thought I would leave it with you, Hal, to take this cowboy topic and end it with a cowboy poem.
Well, it's just the last verse of a cowboy poem by S. Omar Baker. And it's called A Cowboy's Christmas Prayer. And in that last verse, he says, "One more thing we'll ask you, Lord. Just help us what you can to save some seeds of freedom for the future sons of man." And I think that's what we're asking here, is to let us maintain our way of life, let us do the things that we've always done on the Grand Staircase in the realms of policy.
Very good. This has been a great topic. We haven't really covered it completely, but it'll have to do for now. Thank you for tuning in, allowing us into your homes each week with the County Seat. We invite you to make comments on our programs via our Facebook page. You can go to our website, watch the show again, refer it to a friend. We look for you next week. Remember, local government, county government is where your life really happens. So get involved in the process, learn what's going on, and become a part of the solutions to the problems that face us in this great state of Utah. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week on the County Seat.